Raden Saleh. Who is Raden Saleh?
Raden Saleh adalah satu imajinasi.
Betapa kita itu bisa eksotik, bisa penting, bisa berbicara di forum penting di dunia.
Yang membuat saya mendapat inspirasi untuk bisa melakukan berbagai macam hal.
Kita punya itu, dan salah satunya adalah Raden Saleh.
Only some of the people actually knew that Raden Saleh was an artist, a painter.
Not just a painter, but also a budayawan.
Yang muncul di kepala, mengakui aja saya tidak tahu cukup banyak tentang orang ini.
Raden Saleh lahir pada tahun 1811 di Terbayang, Semarang, dari keluarga peranakan Arab Jawa.
Saleh's background was a very different one. He came from a very cosmopolitan background in India, but the family came from Surat in western India. It didn't come from the Hadramaut. Many of the Arab families who came to Indonesia in the 18th century, from the mid-18th century onwards, came from the Hadramaut. From what is now the South Yemen. And that obviously was a pretty poor area, but rich in religious schools.
His father died very young, so Raden Saleh grew up with his mother and his uncle. He moved into the family of his uncle Surwadi Manggolo in Semarang, which by this time was very much connected with the British forces who came to Java in 1811.
Who was the uncle of Saleh, was a renowned, he was used by Raffles as a source on Javanese law and traditions of jurisprudence. And much of what he gave in terms of information was used by Raffles for the history of Java.
Sejak kecil, bakat seninya sudah menonjol dibandingkan anak-anak seumurannya.
What we know from the scholar of Javanese, J.F.C. Gericke, who made a tour into Java before the Java War, into central Java, that he actually met with the very young Raden Saleh and described his extraordinary precocious talent as an artist. The types of day-to-day objects like sort of Van Gogh's shoes and various sort of day-to-day objects which he sketched of fruit and pottery, tableware, fauna and flora. And it's clear that from a very early age he had a very remarkable talent.
Pada umur 9 tahun, Raden Saleh bertemu dengan Auguste Payong, pelukis kerajaan Belanda yang ditugaskan di Pulau Jawa untuk mendokumentasikan alam dan etnografi Jawa.
Payong took this young kid, must have been 8 or 9 years old, with him to West Java to teach him how to draw and to educate him in a most general manner. Spent many, many days and many nights together traveling around West Java. So he definitely must have taught him the Dutch language, maybe some mathematics, because they needed it for drawings and making maps and that sort of thing. And definitely he talked to Raden Saleh a lot about the European culture and the European way of life.
Masa kecil Raden Saleh adalah masa menjelang pecahnya Perang Jawa. Kedekatan keluarga besar Raden Saleh dengan pemimpin Perang Jawa, Pangeran Diponegoro, menempatkan dia pada posisi yang sulit.
Apart from his time in Torboyo in 1824, between July and December After that, when Payong came back, he took Saleh back with him to West Java. And we know from the Dutch reports that he was to some extent quarantined in West Java. He was sent to Cianjur, but he was sort of almost like a sort of internal exile during the 3 years before he left for Europe in 1829, between 26 and 29, in West Java. West Java was not a theatre of war, so basically he was kept as a sort of political hostage in West Java. As a young man, he was a very remarkable, unusual, and unique individual. And I think that uniqueness, that precociousness, that intellect were difficult things to live with. He was not your normal Priai. He couldn't be. He was not your just ordinary Javanese. He wasn't. He was an Arab Javanese of a very high status, and he was highly educated. And all those things meant that he knew what was happening to Java. He was someone who was extremely aware and very well informed.
Pada tahun 1829, Raden Saleh berlayar ke Eropa.
He was the first educated Javanese to make the trip to Europe and stay there for a longer time. And why this happened, we really do not know. There are a number of theories. One theory is that he was taken by a Dutch official as a secretary, and the Dutch official expected that the young Raden Saleh, by this time he was 18 years old, might teach him Bahasa Malayo and Bahasa Jawa on the long trip between Batavia and Europe. There is another theory or another tradition that says, since the family of Raden Saleh, his family in Semarang, Surat in Manggolo, they sided with Diponegoro and were exiled. Since this family was regarded dangerous by the Dutch, they wanted to have an outstanding male member like Raden Saleh was. They wanted to have him to leave the country. He was considered dangerous.
Setibanya di Eropa, pemerintahan Belanda tidak tahu apa yang harus mereka lakukan terhadap Raden Saleh. Lalu Agusti Payong menyarankan kepada pemerintah Belanda untuk memberikan pendidikan melukis kepada Raden Saleh. Raden Saleh belajar melukis landscape di studio Andreas Skilvold dan lukisan potret kepada Cornelius Kruseman. Keduanya adalah pelukis paling terkenal di Belanda pada masa itu. Meskipun sudah menjadi seniman independen di Belanda, Raden Saleh merasa masih ada sesuatu yang kurang dalam lukisannya.
He could not find his style. He was an Indonesian. He came from Java. Now there he was in rather old-fashioned The Hague, and was expected to paint Dutch landscapes, to paint portraits, to paint Christian religious works and this sort of thing. And he could not really relate to it. When in, I think it was 1838, when the French animal tamer, Martin, came to The Hague with all his animals, a lot of lions, tigers, snakes, whatever, Raden Saleh was really attracted to this scenery, and he asked the owner of the animals to allow him to make a lot of drawings of his lions and his tigers. Especially the lions he liked a lot. There was one lion called Nero, by the name of Nero. It was a huge African lion, and Raden Saleh did a number of sketches and later on quite a number of paintings. From this on, he slowly developed his own style. Now he knew what he wanted to do. He was attracted to this French romantic art, connected to animal fights and also hunting scenes.
Pada tahun 1839, pemerintah Belanda merasa bahwa masa pendidikan Raden Saleh sudah cukup dan saatnya dia kembali ke Pulau Jawa. Tetapi sebelum pulang, Raden Saleh diberi kesempatan untuk mengunjungi galeri-galeri seni di Eropa. Setelah berkunjung ke Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, dan Berlin, dia tiba di Dresden. Dia jatuh cinta dengan Dresden dan tidak melanjutkan perjalanannya.
The reason why he was so happy in Dresden is he was received in Dresden as an Oriental prince and as an Oriental artist at the same time. For the first time in his life, he really felt accepted. This kind of situation was very supportive for his development as an artist. In Dresden, he met a number of artists, important artists, also international artists, people from Denmark, from Norway, from other places. He was accepted as an equal among the artists. He created a lot of works in Dresden, and he could sell a lot of works. For the first time in his life, he really could live off his art.
Dresden adalah awal Raden Saleh merasa dihargai sederajat. Lalu pada tahun 1844, Raden Saleh tiba di Coburg dan tinggal di kediaman salah satu temannya, Duke Ernst II of Saxony, Coburg and Gotha. Dari sini, Raden Saleh mulai memasuki lingkaran aristokrat atas di Eropa. Seperti pertemuannya dengan Pangeran Albert, suami Ratu Victoria dari Inggris. Akhirnya Raden Saleh tiba di Paris pada tahun 1845. Paris adalah kota paling kosmopolitan pada masa itu dan merupakan pusat seni di Eropa. Meskipun awalnya merasa syok dengan keramaian Paris, tetapi akhirnya Raden Saleh bisa ikut pameran di Salon Prancis 3 kali. Hal ini membuktikan diterimanya seni Raden Saleh di pusat kesenian Eropa. Pada tahun 1852, Raden Saleh kembali ke Pulau Jawa. Sekembalinya dari Eropa, Raden Saleh adalah manusia yang berpikir dan berperilaku modern. Karena itu, dia merasa harus dihargai oleh pemerintah Hindia Belanda maupun aristokrat Jawa, sebagaimana dia dihargai di Eropa. Hal ini bisa dilihat dari bagaimana Raden Saleh memilih cara berpakaian.
I think it's very interesting. He created a sort of orientalizing style for very practical purposes so that he could appear as someone who had a presence, status, was fashionably linked with the current styles in Europe. But yet, it wasn't just your ordinary run-of-the-mill Dutch uniform. It was something that he actually created. So I think that in terms of the world of fashion in Indonesia, he's someone who is very interesting to study and to emulate because he actually struck new paths. He opened new doors and he created new visions of how an educated, well-appointed, successful Indonesian might appear in public, i.e. partly European, but not quite European, partly Javanese, but not totally Javanese.
Pada tahun 1855, dia menikah dengan Constantia Winkelhagen, janda kaya berasal dari Jerman, lalu membangun rumah di Cikini.
So he had the biggest house and he was living with a white woman. None of this was actually liked by the colonial society. But it was his policy to be respected. I suppose when he came back to Java, he said he had one aim. He wanted to be respected as an equal. Like he was respected in Europe, he wanted to have the same treatment in the colony. But Europe and the colony was different. In the colony, race was the most important marker, not achievement. And after all, his skin was brown, so he was regarded as inferior by his skin.
Perilaku rasis pemerintah Hindia Belanda membuat Raden Saleh bercerai dengan Constantia Winkelhagen. Meskipun kurang mendapat hormat dari pemerintah kolonial, tetapi dia tetaplah diakui sebagai seniman terbesar di Hindia Belanda pada masa itu.
Everybody had to agree that he is and was the foremost artist in the Netherlands in East India. So quite a number of Dutch people came to his studio to get their portraits done. And he also started to do landscape paintings. And everybody agreed that this was outstanding, that his art was really something special. And all the foreign visitors who came to Batavia, they went to his house and recorded their visits with Raden Saleh. So he was a very famous person in Batavia. He was one of the tourist hotspots. If you go to Batavia, you also have to see Raden Saleh.
Pada tahun 1855, Raden Saleh mendengar kabar wafatnya Pangeran Diponegoro di Makassar. Seperti diingatkan lagi oleh ingatan historis masa kecilnya, dia melukis lukisan sejarah penangkapan Pangeran Diponegoro. Dari lukisan ini bisa dibaca bagaimana Raden Saleh sebagai orang Jawa yang mendapatkan pendidikan di Eropa menempatkan posisi dia dalam Perang Jawa maupun kolonialisme Belanda.
And here you see Saleh himself having painted himself 3 times with his signature uniform. Once as a homage to Diponegoro, sujud. Here as a someone looking into the middle distance, looking almost like a clairvoyant, Heldersin. And here is someone sort of scratching his chin as a sort of 19th century scientist to say, well, what does this mean? And then you have the time of the day, it's dawn. It's the dawn of a new era for maybe the Netherlands East Indies, but it's also the dawn of a new era for the moral disorder which the Netherlands East Indies has created, which will later give birth to a new dawn for the Pribumi of Java. You have Diponegoro here with his merah putih on his turban. So I think this is a work of historical precision. It's a picture with keys in it, with certain sort of key symbols. And it's also one which Saleh gave like a Trojan horse to the Dutch king. So he presented this as a present.
Setelah bercerai, Raden Saleh melakukan perjalanan ke Jawa Tengah. Dia ingin lebih mendekatkan diri dengan akar kejawaannya.
In the mid-1860s, when he was sort of moving in transition from Batavia to Bogor, he spent about 18 months in south-central Java, at both courts, but particularly in Jogja. And at that time, he painted various key figures. He painted Hamengkubuwono VI, Pangeran Mangkubumi. He painted various members of the court, the Queen Mother. He painted the sister of Ronggo Warsito. He also, at that time, met and married his second wife, Raden Ayu Danu Direjo, who was a daughter of one of Diponegoro's junior army commanders, Klopo Aking, from Karanganyar in Bagaland. So she had connections with the family of the Pati, of the Prime Minister's family, but he also had a connection with the family of one of Diponegoro's junior commanders.
Pada tahun 1869, terjadi peristiwa yang mengguncang hidup Raden Saleh dan istrinya. Dia ditangkap pemerintah Belanda karena pemberontakan di Bekasi. Meskipun akhirnya dia dibebaskan kembali karena tidak ada bukti keterlibatannya.
And apparently the leader of this rebellion, he claimed in front of the farmers, of the peasants, he claimed that he is Raden Saleh and he is invulnerable and he can lead them to the golden age. We had a lot of these tax rebellions in 19th century Java, and usually the leader of these tax rebellions claimed to be a Ratu Adil, or if it was a more Muslim context, they claimed to be the Mahdi or something like that. But here this guy claimed he's Raden Saleh, and apparently the people believe Raden Saleh must have a lot of magical power. He suffered so much from this event that for the rest of his life he could not recover. I think he suffered this sort of mental breakdown, and years later he was still, in his letters, he was still talking about this event and that this destroyed my life. I cannot really work any longer. I always have to think about this happening back in '69.
Efek peristiwa salah tangkap susah sekali dilupakan Raden Saleh. Peristiwa tersebut bagi Raden Saleh adalah salah satu bukti kesamaan derajat yang selama ini dia dapat di Eropa tidak berlaku di Hindia Belanda. Pada tahun 1875, dia memutuskan kembali ke Eropa. Tetapi Eropa sudah berubah, tidak seperti 23 tahun yang lalu saat dia pulang ke Jawa. Dia kembali ke Jawa tahun 1879. Sekembalinya dari Eropa, dia menetap di Bogor. Raden Saleh yang tua memilih tinggal di Bogor, kota kecil yang dulu bernama Buitenshoek, yang berarti tanpa kecemasan. Sebagai orang Jawa dengan latar belakang kebudayaan Jawa yang kuat, Raden Saleh belajar dan memasuki kebudayaan Eropa. Dia bisa hidup dan bersuara di Eropa. Dia adalah manusia hibrida Jawa dan Eropa.
It was very important for him as a man from Semarang, from Java, to sort of bring together these two worlds he experienced. As I said before, he left Java when he was 18 years old, a young man. And he spent the next 23 years in Europe. This maybe was his formative years, the most important years in his life. And he learned a lot during this time. So it was very important for him to bring these two worlds, the world where he came from, the East, and the world where he grew up, together. Because his idea was only if both worlds get to know of each other and can learn from each other, both will get a better understanding and also gain in knowledge. So he not only was thinking about it, he actually did it. He was trying to bring East and West together. In the end, he failed because of colonial situation.
Lukisan-lukisan Raden Saleh bertema potret. Lukisan potret ini penting kita lihat karena ini menggambarkan atau menandakan kepentingan, menggambarkan posisi Raden Saleh dalam konteks kehidupannya. Nah, saya melihat lukisan-lukisan potret ini menunjukkan bahwa Raden Saleh sepanjang hidupnya dari awal dan menjelang akhir berada dalam lingkaran elit birokrasi, elit bangsawan. Lukisan-lukisan potret ini memiliki kepentingan. Pertama, itulah lingkaran kehidupan Raden Saleh. Kedua, kepentingannya adalah kepentingan tendensi. Ada tendensi lobby di sana. Selama dia hidup di Eropa misalnya, adalah dia berada dalam patronase pemerintah kolonial Belanda. Kemudian potret-potret para bangsawan di Jawa juga saya kira dalam pandangan saya untuk kepentingan itu. Tema yang dia banyak kerjakan adalah tema panorama. Mengapa ini penting? Ini saya kira juga menggambarkan tema panorama ini, menggambarkan keterbelahan seorang Raden Saleh. Lukisan-lukisan panorama ini berbeda dengan tendensi lukisan potret, tidak ada kepentingan lobby, tetapi semata-mata menggambarkan kesadaran seorang manusia di bawah kebesaran semesta. Dalam lukisan-lukisan panorama itu diposisikan menjadi manusia yang kecil-kecil, yang tidak close up, tidak dihadirkan tidak dihadirkan secara dominan dalam lukisan itu. Tema-tema binatang ini menarik karena inilah saya kira tanda paling kuat dari karya-karya Raden Saleh. Emosi yang terlibat secara penuh, keterampilan master seorang maestro yang menguasai teknik dengan hebat itu menurut pandangan saya adalah ditampakkan ketika dia melukis tema-tema binatang. Disitulah Raden Saleh kemudian menghadirkan tidak saja melukis potret binatang, tetapi secara tematik dan secara ideologis dia menghadirkan apa yang saya sebut sebagai perkara-perkara eksistensialisme, perkara-perkara batas yang tipis antara hidup dan mati, batas yang tipis antara merebutkan atau mempertahankan eksistensi, hidup atau mati, pertarungan yang liar untuk mempertahankan kehidupan. Aspek manusia dalam lingkaran drama ini juga tanda yang sangat penting dalam Raden Saleh. Ketika manusia dihadapkan pada makhluk lain, dalam hal ini binatang. Nah, tema-tema ini misalnya saya lihat diawali dari model pertarungan-pertarungan, berburu banteng, perkelahian dengan singa, atau tema-tema seperti itu, atau manusia dihadapkan pada ancaman, pada perkelahian, pada berburu banteng misalnya, bagaimana manusia mengambil posisi dominan untuk mempertahankan kehidupannya. Tema antara hidup dan mati, tema yang menggambarkan eksistensialisme kehidupannya, tema yang mengadakan batas tipis untuk merebut kehidupan atau berada di ruang kematian. Ini semakin tampak kental, semakin tampak nyata pada tema manusia dalam lingkaran drama ini. Jadi ada saatnya lukisan itu manusia mengambil kendali, dia mengendalikan drama kehidupannya. Ada saatnya manusia dalam posisi tersudut. Nah, tema ini saya melihatnya berpuncak pada lukisan penangkapan Pangeran Diponegoro.
Posisi Raden Saleh di perkembangan seni rupa Indonesia terkait dengan posisi atas karya-karya dia dalam memulai perkembangan seni rupa Indonesia modern. Jadi dalam hal ini Raden Saleh dan karya-karyanya itu berada di garis depan sejarah perkembangan seni rupa Indonesia modern. Raden Saleh meletakkan dirinya pada posisi di mana seni rupa Indonesia terkait dengan persoalan-persoalan yang terjadi di masa Raden Saleh hidup. Jadi tidak lagi terkait dengan tema-tema masa lalu maupun hal-hal yang terlampau lokal yang terkait dengan persoalan spiritual. Sehingga otomatis dalam hal ini Raden Saleh dianggap sebagai perintis perkembangan seni rupa modern Indonesia. Raden Saleh adalah inspirasi banyak orang di Indonesia, tentu saja pelukis-pelukis hari ini. Ada satu konsep ideologi yang mendukung atas implementasi inspirasi ini ke dalam seni rupa sekarang, seni rupa kontemporer, adalah satu konsep mengenai parodi. Jadi ada banyak karya-karya Raden Saleh yang kemudian menjadi objek parodi dalam perkembangan seni rupa kontemporer Indonesia saat ini. Selain metode parodi atau pendekatan yang dinamakan apropriasi, yaitu sedikit melecehkan tetapi juga sebagai sebuah penghormatan terhadap Raden Saleh, itu juga mengalami satu pemikiran yang lumayan banyak gitu. Jadi pelukis-pelukis sekarang itu misalnya banyak mengeksplorasi lukisan-lukisan yang digarap oleh Raden Saleh, misalnya lukisan penangkapan Pangeran Diponegoro.
Pada 23 April 1880, Raden Saleh meninggal dan dimakamkan di Kampung Impang, tempat yang dia pilih sendiri.
So after all, his life came to an end in a really depressed situation. He started out as an inventive and very important artist, and through the colonial attitudes, through colonial history, through the times he had to live in, his life was destroyed in the end. He was one of the victims of colonialism.